Good evening, everybody. Tonight we are doing a live webinar that will also be recorded for future use. This webinar is on modern uses of life insurance. Very important because life insurance is becoming more useful and more versatile now with respect to various components of estate planning. Everything from the traditional estate tax to modern uses with income taxes. So I'm going to talk about a lot of those uses, practical uses, when you should be thinking about it, what types of insurance you might consider. I'm not a life insurance expert as to the type of insurances, but I do know when I see a situation where you might need it. We'll talk about some situations where it's very clear that you need it, and some metrics to measure how much you should have. None of this is exact. The metrics are used as a basic metric. They're based on a number of circumstances that may be going on in your personal life. For instance, are both husband and wife working? What kind of savings do you have? Did you have a large inheritance? Do you owe a lot of money on your home? Are there student loans involved in the situation? So there's any number of things that would become a element of the conversation regarding life insurance that you might need, particularly if you're younger, and particularly if you have young children. So with that said, I do want to mention that I'm happy to answer questions. One of my problems is, as I get close to this thing, I'm going to do my best. I am not sure, because my technical abilities are somewhat limited. I'm not sure how to find or see the questions during the webinar. That's my problem. And so it's my fault. I've tried to get decent at using this. Unfortunately, I'm not great at it, so I apologize ahead of time. So I do tell people that if they do have questions, they can always email me after. I will do my best to do whatever I can to answer those questions down the road. So let's start, and I know there's a lot of things to be concerned about. I'm going to raise a lot of issues today. I do try to keep it to 50 minutes or so. It ends up usually being about an hour, maybe less, maybe more, it depends. So I always start with the basics. It's really, really important to understand the basics, understand how estate planning works at its most elemental level, and that is, of course, first and foremost, the last will and testament, right? So your will. What does your will do? Your will distributes those things that you have to the people you care about, and it tells when they get it and how they get it. So that's disposal of assets, okay? Now, certainly it's more complicated than that because it does require something called probate, which means it's required to be filed with the court, and certain people are required to sign off on it, things like that. For our purpose today, I'm going to keep it simple because we've got a lot to talk about with respect to life insurance. But probate's important because that is a legal process that is handled through the surrogate court for each county, depending on the county you live in. There is a filing fee, and so that costs a little money to get started. You must have your will, and you must have a death certificate and a petition to get that started. But the will does dispose of your assets. Understand something, there are certain rules required. Must be signed, must be revoking prior wills, and it must be witnessed by at least 2 people. There's other requirements, but those are some of the basics. Very important that everybody have a will in place. If you have any assets, if you have any family, if you have anything going on, you got to have a will. Most basic element, number 1. Number 2, HCP, healthcare proxy. So what does the healthcare proxy do? As you may know, the healthcare proxy appoints a person to make healthcare decisions for you. Now, the one thing about the healthcare proxy is it doesn't take effect until you are no longer able to make decisions. When I get to the power of attorney, we'll talk a little bit about how that's different. But the healthcare proxy is healthcare decision making. So not only do you appoint someone or a hierarchy of people, 1, 2, or 3 people perhaps, but also you give them some information and some instructions on how you wish to be treated. For instance, you may say, Under certain conditions, you don't want to be kept alive by artificial means. Okay, now that is not a DNR. Let's be very clear. Not a DNR or DNI. A DNR or a DNI is created by a doctor using the MOLST form. MOLST, Medical Orders of Life-Sustaining Treatment. That is a medical form, similar to a healthcare proxy, actually more similar to what we used to refer to as a living will. So that's New York's version of a living will, the MOLST form. Must be countersigned by a doctor if you're going to have a DNR or DNI on that, okay? So, but a healthcare proxy or healthcare document can tell the healthcare agent how you wish to be treated at life's end. Okay, that's important. Also can be tell them how you wish to have your body dealt with. So your remains. How do you want to be treated, or who's going to be in charge of your remains, more importantly. So keep that in mind, because that tells, you can put in some idea on there who's going to be in charge and how they're going to deal with your remains. So that's important too. So healthcare proxy, very important document, because it is your opportunity to tell the world or tell your agents how you wish to be treated. The power of attorney is the last one of your basic elemental estate planning documents. This one is perhaps the most important, because the will, if you don't have a will, New York State has a will for you. It tells you how things will be distributed at your death if you don't have one. The healthcare proxy New York State does have a hierarchy of healthcare decision makers. That does not give any instructions, but it certainly allows for certain people to make decisions for you if you are incapacitated. Power of attorney, however, does not provide, or New York State does not provide, an easy out if you don't have a power of attorney. The only true alternate is for you to become a guardian or obtain a guardianship over a person who is incapacitated. That is not only a long process, an expensive process, but it's a difficult process. And it means going to court and spending a lot of money. Unfortunately, if you don't have a power of attorney, that's what you're left with. I strongly, strongly urge everyone to get a power of attorney. Now, not all powers of attorney are created equally. No, you must have a power of attorney that has gifting power in it. Because if you don't have gifting power, the ability to move assets out of your name, should you go into a nursing home or should something occur where you might need Medicaid or assistance with medical care, you want the ability to do some asset protection. And if you don't have gifting power, you don't have asset protection power. Okay? So you need that. So really important that you have a power of attorney that has gifting power and that has some additional powers in it, put in there by the attorney, called modifications, to ensure that we have the ability to do things like create a trust for you, move assets, things of that nature. Very, very important. So these are the three basic elements. These are must-haves for anybody who's got anything, has children, who's married, any of that stuff. Okay? All right, so let's move on from the basics to some of the first steps. So, modern uses of life insurance. A very important topic on Big Pro Life Insurance, because life insurance does a lot of things. It can cure a lot of ills in your estate plan. One of those ills that we'll be talking about today is taxes. I'm gonna feed into taxes in a minute. I'm gonna start with the basic stuff. We're gonna start with young parents. Okay, young parents is incredibly important. If you are a young parent, or I should say a parent of young children, then it's very important that you have life insurance. This is the way I explain it to young parents. Okay, and oftentimes we have a two-parent working family. So here is your income level, and here is your lifestyle. Now, people tend to raise their lifestyle up to their income. Not everyone, but a lot of people tend to move up and get their lifestyle into the income, up to where their income is. So what happens if we lose one of the parents and now our income is down here? Okay? As a result of that death, we now have a vast disparity between income and lifestyle. That's a problem. That's a big problem for our young parents. How do we maintain this lifestyle? So the easiest thing to consider is using the metric 10 times salary for all parents of young children. Again, if you're both working, if you have debts, if you have a mortgage, you understand children want to go to college someday. College is not cheap. I estimate college to be between $200,000 and $300,000 per child. You really got to have some life insurance in place. Again, basic metric, 10 times your salary. Could it be higher than that? Yes. Could you satisfy it with lower than that? It depends. So we need to know the circumstances. But if you, for lack of speaking to an attorney, start with that number, or a financial advisor. Start with that number. Now, how does it work? Because it matters how it works. With young parents, we have to make sure, if this is your will, we have to make sure the life insurance gets to your children properly. So let's say this person has 2 children, and they are 4 and 5. This person is married, so I'm going to call this John Smith. So John Smith leaves his life insurance to his spouse. Terrific. What happens if they die in a common accident? Well, what I don't want John Smith to do is leave this money to his sister. I don't want him to leave it to his dad or his mom. Okay, these are all no-nos. Next door neighbor, mailman, no, 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 right? What do we want to do right now, or his kids, right? Because they're 4 and 5, we don't want to leave it to the kids. So these are all no-nos. We don't want to do that. What we want to do is, the easiest way, I'm not saying it's the best way, because there's other ways to do this, but the easiest way is to leave no contingent beneficiary. It then ends up in John Smith's will, which then in turn creates trusts for the 4-year-old and the 5-year-old down here. And it puts it in trust for them until they are 25 or 30, depending on what John Smith wanted to do. Now, why is that important? Because when it's in the trust, the trustee, whoever you put in charge, gets to dole out the funds as needed to the young people. Okay? If the money ends up with them directly, it goes into a guardianship account. They have access, they have very little access to that money. But at 18, they get all the money. That is not a good thing if you understand 18-year-olds and how they operate. We don't want 18-year-olds to have access or use of this money. We'd prefer to wait till 25, 27, 30, 35. It depends. So really important that this life insurance is set up properly. Extremely important for people with young children. Okay? So this is the first one. This is a simple one. Very important to use life insurance for this. So young parents, number 1. Okay, hope that was clear. I understand I'm going fast. I apologize. I've got a lot of ground to cover. And again, I wish someday I want to get back to doing these live so I can have someone raise their hand and ask questions. All right? Okay, now we're going to go back to, I did a little outline here, but I'm going to talk about things in a little different order. So I'm going to go to blended families. Now, if you were lucky enough to be here for my last webinar last month, you know I spent some time talking about blended families, young parents, and things like that. Well, I'm going to go to the blended family issue again. So this is a situation where we have husband and wife, and let's say they each have 2 children. They come into the marriage with 2 children, no common children. How do we ensure that each parent gets to leave their children something? Because traditionally, a will would leave everything to the spouse, right? We call that the sweetheart will. And that's great. Leave everything to your spouse. But the problem is this spouse over here, when he or she dies, has their 2 children and wants to leave everything to their 2 children, leaving this person's children out in the cold. We don't want to do that. So what we want to do is we want to create trusts for these 2 children. We want to take some of the life insurance and put it into these trusts for these children to ensure that when the first person dies, their children get a gift from their parent. Therefore, if all the assets go to the surviving spouse and the surviving spouse decides to leave everything to their own children, at the very least, these 2 children got an inheritance. Okay? This may be a little confusing, I apologize, but it's really important to understand that with blended families, there's things we can do to accommodate both the parents, making sure their children get something. All right? Sometimes it means you have to get a little bit more life insurance, get a little tricky with life insurance, do change up the beneficiaries a little bit, but it's important to understand that that is a way we can effectuate a blended family status and distribution satisfactory. Okay? So, again, life insurance, very, very important in that scenario. All right. Now, so those are the two most straightforward ones using wills. Now we're going to get into a little more sophisticated stuff and talk about a little tax stuff. Very important in the modern planning world. Two of the big ones are income tax and nursing home protection. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the baby boomers and the next generation coming up. Because one of the issues we have is we're seeing a lot of people retiring with very large IRAs, jumbo IRAs, millions, $1.5 million, $2 million, $3 million IRAs. As a result, we have tax issues built into those IRAs that we have to try to resolve. As you can imagine, or as you know, an IRA is completely taxable when the funds are taken out of it. There's no way around that. And even if you do a Roth conversion early on, that's going to be taxable. The Roth won't be taxable, but the main IRA will still remain taxable. And also, you can't give it to your spouse. While you're alive, you can't give it away. You can't give it to your spouse, your kids, your next door neighbor. You can't do anything with it. So you're stuck with it until you die, unless you get divorced, which is a whole other conversation. So let's say we've got a couple with a $3 million IRA. Now this is a situation. I'm going to start with the basics and explain how this works and how the change in the law 2 years ago it relates to this. So if let's say this is Joe Smith and he's got a $3 million IRA. Now right now we want to leave this principally to his spouse. I should have done it Joe Smith. I don't want to get in trouble. But let's say this person leaves their IRA to their spouse. Great. Now the spouse has, at their death, and the spouse now has $3 million. Terrific. No tax consequences at that time. Pouring it over or rolling it over to the spousal IRA is no problem. Now the spouse will withdraw based on their life expectancy. Now, when the spouse dies and leaves it to the 3 children, now what happens is this IRA must be paid out to the 3 children over a 10-year period. Let's assume they're all over the age of majority and they are not disabled. So they have a 10-year period to withdraw this $3 million out. So it's $1 million a piece, let's say. Okay? Now, what's the problem with drawing out $1 million over a 10-year period? You have to pay tax on it. That's a big problem. And what's the bigger issue? Depending on their situations and depending on how they manage this withdrawal, this could bump them up into another bracket. So I call it the bracket buster, right? This new law is creating bracket busting. So it pushes them into another bracket, which of course does what? It causes them to pay a higher percentage in taxes. Not only on this withdrawal, but also on their basic salary, whatever they're earning. So now they're going to pay 2, 3, 4, up to 7, 8, 9% more, some instances 12% more in taxes. This could go on for years. Could be 1 year, could be more years. Depending on how they manage the withdrawals, this could end up being relatively punitive to them, costing them tens of thousands of dollars in taxes. Well, that's not what we want to do. And for someone who's got a $3 million IRA, it means they've got some money to spend, which means we want to do this. We want to take Joe Smith, and we want to take some distributions from his IRA, and we want to buy life insurance with it. Okay? Now, ordinarily, I recommend we put that in a trust. I won't get into necessarily talking about how the trust works at this point. But we want to buy life insurance. The life insurance now, by the way, you should know that life insurance proceeds currently are tax-free. Let's use the premise that they are tax-free. So what we're doing is taking a very tax-laden IRA, right? A $3 million IRA, which is conceptually could be taxed up to a third of that. So $1 million of that money is going to go to taxes. Instead, we're going to buy life insurance of $1 million. Now, this $1 million is tax-free. It will cost some money every year to pay that. But let's say it costs $25,000 of withdrawals from the IRA to buy this life insurance policy. Now what we're doing is, when this person dies and leaves the IRA to the spouse, let's use the spouse, $3 million IRA, also $1 million in life insurance proceeds. All right? So as a result, and these are tax-free. Now, when this spouse dies, leaving all of this to the children, now the children have not only the $3 million, but they have the $1 million to backfill their estate with the taxes that they're going to have to pay. This is a win-win situation because they're actually going to get more money. They're going to be able to pay the taxes. Now, I know it's some people out there saying, well, they're getting $1 million, so they can afford the taxes. Absolutely. This is a strategy. This is a strategy that we use to minimize taxes, because not only are we going to give the $3 million, we're also going to have this tax-free portion. For someone who's got $3 million in IRAs, buying the extra $1 million life insurance should be affordable, and therefore allowing the children to have more money. Now, if that's not your goal, that's okay. For a lot of my folks, when they come in and see me, they say, hey, listen, one of my goals is to reduce my taxes. How do I manage that? What are the ways I can manage my taxes? And, you know, I have people come in with more than $3 million. It could be $4, $5, $6 million in IRAs. Now we're into a real situation, particularly if they have 1 or 2 kids. This is a serious bracket buster situation. And when we get into serious bracket buster situations, that's when I start to really push towards the life insurance. Exploration of the cost and the eligibility of life insurance becomes really important at that stage of the game. You know, I rarely have a client that walks in and says, I don't care how much taxes I pay. And by the way, this doesn't eliminate taxes. It just backfills the estate with cash to pay the taxes or to help pay the taxes. Again, it's a win situation for this family to make sure that everything, that the kids get the $3 million of IRA money basically tax-free. That's the concept. We also call this an estate substitution strategy. So what we're doing is using IRA money to buy life insurance to substitute taxable money for non-taxable money. I hope that makes sense. It's a really good strategy, and a lot of my clients really think this is a great idea. In fact, I've talked to one today who's exploring the life insurance concept for this very reason. Okay? All right, so I hope this makes sense. Jumbo IRAs, equals lots of tax, equals we need a solution, which means life insurance is one of those solutions to make sure that we can reduce that cost. All right. Hopefully we're doing okay. I am trying to make sure that if there are any questions, I'm answering, but again, I don't know how to do that. So, all right. So this is one of the big ones is, how do we take care of income tax? So that was an income tax solution. I hope that was clear. As you may know, one of the issues coming up is with the Biden administration is the changing of the taxes, raising of the marginal rates, raising of the highest marginal rate, which could affect lots of people who are inheriting these jumbo IRAs. And even if it moves you from 37 to 39%, that's 2%, and that can be ultimately can be a lot of money every year. But if it does bump you from say 24 to 37 or 39, that's a lot of money. That's a 10 to 13% difference, and then tax-wise, that's a big chunk of change. So if we can manage those costs, then we're helping somebody or we're helping a family to figure out how to minimize their exposure. So that was the income tax piece. All right. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about something that we're not quite clear on yet, and that is capital gains. Now, capital gains tax is, you may or may not know, is currently, generally speaking, lower than the income tax rate. Currently, that may change. Again, this is a piece, part of the Biden administration is talking about modifying this. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the proposals how it could affect families, and not just wealthy, but even moderately wealthy or middle income or middle class folks, based on some of the proposals that we've heard. So let me talk about explaining capital gains and how it works right now. So first of all, if you buy a stock for $1 a share, that is called your tax or cost basis in that stock. If it rises in value and gets up to $51 a share, the $50 difference is called your capital gain, right? So if you buy a house for $100,000 and it's now worth $200,000, there's a $100,000 gain in that house. If, with respect to stock in particular, if you sell this stock in any given calendar year, you are subject to capital gains tax. Capital gains tax, the rate is dependent upon how much gain you have and about how much income you earn. Suffice it to say, it's 20 to 25% right now between federal and state tax. Okay, so the gain is only paid when it's realized. Realized means you actually sold it, received the money, and now you got to pay the tax on it. There is a proposal, part of the proposal in the Biden administration is to pay tax on unrealized gain, which means you'll pay tax on stocks you haven't yet sold. I think this is subject to people who earn a lot of money, but this is part of the proposal. Now, what happens currently, this is the current rule. If you die owning this stock, so you bought it for $1, that's your cost basis. If you sold it for $51, you'd pay tax on $50. However, if you die owning it, you get what's called a stepped up basis, which means the feds say if you sell that the day after you die, or if your family sells that the day after you die, they pay zero tax because there's zero gain, because that's your new cost basis right there. Okay? This is a big deal in estate planning, a really big deal, because we'll have people who come in, have lots of money in their brokerage account, their investments, and even real estate such as camps, second homes, Florida homes, things like that. And when we talk about selling these things, we'll try to find a way often to not sell it during their lifetime, and sell it and hold on to it until they pass, so that we get the step up, so that the kids don't have to pay the tax on it. This is a big cost savings or tax savings methodology that we use, or strategy that we use. So what happens if the IRS or the administration says you can't do this anymore? What happens if they say, we're going to give you a partial exemption, but after the exemption, you're going to have to pay capital gains on this. This will be your cost basis when you die. So instead of getting a stepped up, you're going to get what's called a carryover basis. Okay? Now, that carryover basis means the family inherits at this cost basis at the $1, and when they sell it, they got to pay the capital gain. So obviously, when we look at these situations, we want to protect against these potential taxes. So what do? Back to talking to the family about life insurance. Again, if we have a lot of capital gain built into someone's estate, oftentimes they have a lot of money. What does that mean? It means hopefully they can afford to buy some life insurance. And it doesn't have to be a lot of life insurance. It could be $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. What we're trying to do is cover the potential taxes, not the gain, but the tax. So if there's $1 million gain, the tax might be $250,000. That might be what we want to buy the life insurance on, $250,000. Okay. So another way to use life insurance to our advantage is to use some of your investments to buy life insurance to cover the gains. Now, we want to push off selling the stock as long as possible till husband and wife both pass away, because at the time we might get the stepped up basis. Laws could change. We're always watching what the laws do, and we're always keeping an eye on it. Unfortunately, it's hard to manage every client's situation for these things. Clients have to pay attention to this themselves. If we do a strategy like buying life insurance, then we've got a plan in place no matter what happens. If the law is in place and it will make this situation a carryover basis situation, we've got the life insurance and we're covered. If we get a stepped up basis and the kids don't have to pay tax and they have life insurance, okay, well, they got stepped up basis and they got life insurance. Again, no harm, win-win. So good use of life insurance. Now, on a lot of these situations, what we want to do is we want to leverage the husband and wife, both of their lives. We will have them buy what's called a second to die policy. So what does that mean? It means we're insuring both the husband and wife. So if we've got husband and wife, if one dies, the life insurance continues. You got to keep paying the premiums, keep going, and it doesn't pay till the second one dies. Well, why would we do that? First, as part of the strategy, we don't need the life insurance till both parents are dead. Number two, the use of the second to die policy brings the premium cost down, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for is low premium, high death benefit. This is a strategy for low premium, high death benefit. Oftentimes, I'm talking to people in the early 60s, even early 70s, trying to do this. So we're trying to minimize the cost. We don't have time to invest in, usually time to invest in a whole life policy. So generally we're using guaranteed universal life or some kind of universal life product. We just don't have the flexibility to use a whole life policy. I do think, as a general estate planning tip, those people in their 50s, depending on how old their children are, should start considering at 50 looking into a permanent policy as part of their long-term plan. For instance, you have real estate, IRAs, you have, someday you'll have Social Security, presumably. You might have investments of non-IRA type. You might have CDs, you might have cash. You might have all kinds of different investments. You have a pool of different things that you're investing in as part of either your retirement or of your estate plan. Why not make life insurance part of that plan? I often talk to people about all the stuff they invest in and all the stuff they have. Why not use life insurance as part of that? Because for all the things we've talked about so far and the things I'm going to talk about, it's a great tool. It's a great leveraging tool for to use later on. One of the big things I'm going to get to at the end here is talking about long-term care costs and how we leverage life insurance to cover long-term care. I know it doesn't make sense, but you'll see it in a minute. I want to be sure I've covered the main parts. I'm going to cover one thing and then I'm going to cover long-term care. So, traditional method, okay? Traditional use of life insurance or estate taxes. I'll limit my discussion for the moment to New York State because New York State currently has a lower limit than the federal government on its estate tax limit. It also has a different way of approaching how you can use your exemption. So I'm going to give you the easiest, briefest description. I don't want to get too complicated. Everybody's different, so we can talk about it. But let's say I've got a family who's got $17 million. Okay, it's not uncommon now to see people with $17 million. So, how do we do this in New York State? Well, we've got estate planning or tax planning 101, and that is that we essentially, for ease of description, I'm going to call it separate the estate. So I'm going to say we have $8.5 million between husband and wife. Okay, we have 8.5. So when the first person dies, I always kill the husband first. So let's say this is the husband. He dies. His estate creates what's called a credit shelter or a family trust. And if we're using a current about $6 million exemption, $6 million goes into a credit shelter trust. 2.5 million, oops, I should have drawn it this way. 2.5 million goes into what's called the marital trust, which gets the marital deduction. Now, zero tax here, zero tax here at the death of the first. Now what happens is when this spouse dies, we take the 8.5, we add the 2.5 to their estate. That is 11 million. We subtract the 6 million. Of course, they're over the 6 million, which means we're going to pay tax. Not only are we going to pay tax, but because in New York we have what's called the fiscal cliff, which if you own more than 110% of the exemption, or 6.6 million, you're going to pay tax on essentially the entire 11 million. So this is a lot of tax for this family. Okay? So they're going to pay a big chunk of tax when the second person dies. So what do we do to minimize this tax situation for these folks? We go to, and this is tax planning 101, so you have to do this part to save at least the first $6 million. What do we do next? Well, 201 is creating what's commonly referred to as an ILIT, or an irrevocable life insurance trust. And what we do is we take some of this $17 million, we put it in this trust annually, and we buy life insurance. And let's say we buy $1 million, just to keep it simple. We buy $1 million of life insurance. When these folks die, this is non-tax, right? There's no income tax on that because it's life insurance. And there's no estate tax because that is out of their estate. So when they die, they've got $1 million in here that they can then use to pay the tax on this $11 million. Okay? Is it a perfect situation? It's not perfect. Nothing's perfect. But this is one way to help pay the taxes and reduce their estate tax exposure. This is a really relatively straightforward methodology. I was going to say simple, but it's not simple. Straightforward methodology. This is not the only way to do things like this, but is really the most effective and straightforward. Buying life insurance inside a life insurance trust and gifting money to that life insurance trust annually is a really, really important method. Now, I will say that Congress, at least in the proposals I've recently read, is talking about trying to chip away at some of these tricks. The life insurance trust. This one I think we'll be able to preserve pretty simply because this one isn't too tricky. There are other tricky ones, selling assets to trusts and things like that they're going to try to chip away at. And frankly, I don't know how far the administration is going to get because it's not like the people in Congress don't have money that they too want to protect. Nevertheless, they will make some headway in changing some of these rules, which, like every administration, it comes and goes and things change, and we'll have to deal with it. Well, this is the basic element. So we're using life insurance, leveraging life insurance to protect against estate taxes. Very traditional, very important methodology. We can't forget that what was once often used is still important and still a sound practice today. For a while, this wasn't as big a deal because federally, we have an exemption of about $12 million per person, or $22 million. The problem is we live in New York, and New York doesn't have that. And quite frankly, the feds in 2025 will drop back to a lower level. I think it's 5 million, 6 million. And we'll be faced with this on the federal level again. So it's good to be prepared. So buying life insurance in this situation is really important. And once you get over $6, $7, $8 million, life insurance really should be a component of your estate plan. All right. So estate taxes, really important. Now, what I see more often is those people who don't have millions of dollars, but rather have maybe 500, 600, 700, up to maybe $1 million, and are concerned about long-term care costs because long-term care is expensive, right? Going into the nursing home is very expensive. What's the problem? Well, you could buy long-term care, LTC insurance, but it's expensive. It's very expensive now. What's the other issue? What's the percentage of people who actually use their long-term care? Because frankly, not everybody goes in the nursing home. And if you have long-term care insurance and have paid premiums for years on that and don't go in the nursing home, what does your family get? Zero. And so that's not necessarily a great solution. What we're looking for is a solution that really pays off no matter what. Now, long-term care is nice because it will do a monthly payment or a weekly payment or however you want to do it, or however the contract is structured, to reimburse you for payments you come out of pocket to pay caregivers. So you want to stay home, you want to pay caregivers, the long-term care insurance will reimburse you for some of, maybe not all, but some of that care. Great. Well, why is the dynamic changing a little bit now? Well, simple. We're going back to the reality of the baby boomers and the mid-age baby boomers. So, you know, baby boomers are, 45, born in 1945 all the way up to 63, I think. So as we're seeing now, the folks that are 70 years old, the mid-level baby boomers right now, are retiring with large IRAs. So we're back to this IRA issue. So if someone comes in and they got $1 million in IRAs, and we're talking about how do we protect against long-term care costs? There's a couple of ways, but really the strategy comes down to this. Let's say we want to create a trust. So we're going to go back to my irrevocable Medicaid trust. And the way I describe it, of course, if you've been here before, and if you haven't, hopefully you can see that that is a safe. This is how I describe my Medicaid trust. It's an irrevocable trust to protect assets. What we do is we buy life insurance in the trust. We use the IRAs, again, to pay the premiums, to buy the life insurance. Now, if this person wants care at home, what they do is they use their income to pay for the care. Now, we have to understand that this is part of the plan. We've planned for this. We can't get to the point where someone needs care at home and someone has a fit that we're using their IRAs to pay for home care. That was part of the plan. What did we do to accommodate that? What we did is, not only did we put their house and some of their investments in here, but we bought life insurance with the IRA money, with the full understanding that if we're going to use some of the IRA money to take care of this person if they want to stay in their home, that the life insurance is going to pay the kids back or the estate back some of those or all those costs related to the home care or even the nursing home care. Okay? Why is that important? Because, first of all, we got all this taxable money. We want to use taxable money to pay for care because you may very well get a deduction and therefore pay less in taxes, therefore pass less taxes on to your children. That's number one. What do we also know? Life insurance is tax-free. We like that as well. Also, what if you never go into the nursing home or never need home care? You die in your sleep at 90 years old, never having needed to do any of that stuff. What happens? Your family gets whatever's left in the IRA and the life insurance. They get both. A very good outcome. What happens if you're 90 years old, but paid for long-term care insurance for 30 years, die in your sleep in your own bed, and your family gets what? Your IRA, but nothing else. So again, it's a leveraging tool to use life insurance to take advantage of the large IRA that might be out here that we can pay for home care with and still allow the family to get the life insurance proceeds. I liken it to this. I ask my clients, okay, if you want to make a bet and you've got a 30% chance of winning, or you want to make a bet and you've got a 100% chance of winning, which bet do you want to make? Well, what does everyone say? I want to make the bet that has a 100% chance of winning. Well, sure, that's life insurance because you have a 100% chance of dying, right? But long-term care, you might have a 30% chance of going into the nursing home and using even enough long-term care to pay yourself back from the premiums you pay. And if you're a male, you're even less likely than a female to get the benefits out of long-term care. So this is a really good strategy. And we're talking to people about thinking of doing the life insurance earlier, 50 years old, before 55, getting it in place. It's less costly. You're more healthy, right? Which means your premiums will be down if you get a preferred rate. Buy it early, make it part of your portfolio, make it part of your long-term plan, and then you have it in place to take care of you if you need any of this stuff. So this is a really good strategy, but if you're 75 years old, it becomes almost impossible to do this strategy. So So you need to consider this in your 50s, maybe early 60s. You don't want to wait till you're 70 or 75 years old to do this. It's simply very, very expensive. Okay? So, again, strategizing with life insurance to cover long-term care costs is important. So as you can see, we've had a number of ways we can strategize or use life insurance today. So I'm going to erase this. I'm just going to list out the different ways we use life insurance and how they're important. So number one, parents of young children, keeping in mind 10 times salary. Again, basic metric. Talk to your financial advisor to get the final determination how much you should have. Number two, we talked about, I'm going to get my cheat sheet here, right? Blended families. So gifts to my children. How's that? Important. Number three, we talked about, I can remember what order I went in here. We talked about income tax. How do we protect against those IRAs, those large IRAs, and the tax implications to our children who have to pull them out over a 10-year period? Okay? Oh, we talked about capital gains, taxes, and what might happen, what the current rule is, what might happen, and how we protect against potential capital gains issues using life insurance. We talked about the ever popular estate tax. So, if you have a larger estate, how we protect against estate tax issues. Okay, very important if you've got a large estate to consider life insurance. And number six, and really important, probably the most popular one I deal with, in addition to the young families, would be asset protection, nursing home costs. Okay, leveraging life insurance to protect against long-term care costs. Not a traditional method, right? Not long-term care insurance, not even saving your nickels to pay for the nursing home, but paying yourself or your family back using life insurance if you do have to go into a nursing home and to use some of your own money for costs, particularly, as I said, home care. Home care is in a really tragic state right now. Home care, which is a widely used, there's a large market for home care out there right now. It is, unfortunately, very difficult to find people. And if you're going to use Medicaid, very hard to find people who are willing to take minimum wage that Medicaid pays for home care people. So the Medicaid home care strategy that we've been using for years has been really hurt by both some changes in the law that are coming down or that have been implemented, and the rise of not minimum wage, because minimum wage is, I think, $13.20, but the rise in what people are actually getting paid at various jobs. So you can go down to Dunkin' Donuts and make $15 an hour. Well, would you provide home care at $13.20 an hour if you can go to Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's and make more? This is the problem. We're having a real shortage of home caregivers, and so home care is a real problem right now. So having money available to pay caregivers, or having money to pay a service or a company that provides this service, would be important. It's expensive, not going to lie to you, and you need someone to help you. You need a manager, which means one of your children has to help manage it, but nonetheless, really important to understand and have funds in place and have a strategy in place for this kind of thing. Okay? So, again, I want to reiterate, first thing we talked about was will, healthcare proxy, power of attorney, how important those are, how really, really important it is to have a power of attorney that you've created, that it's been created by an attorney, because New York State does not automatically have one for you, so that's important. Number 2, various strategies with life insurance. All kinds of strategies we're using with life insurance to protect you and your family against future costs, taxes, nursing home, etc. I hope this stuff was clear. Again, I know I went through it quickly. It is important to understand the different elements to this. I'm looking to see if there's a way I can find out if anybody has questions. I cannot tell. I cannot tell because I'm not good at this, so I apologize. This will be recorded, is being recorded, and will be held on our Facebook page in case you want anyone else to see it, or if you think your parents should see it, or your grandparents, or whomever. I do appreciate anyone coming that came tonight to spend a few minutes with me trying to learn some things. Again, I do try to keep it to about 45 to 50 minutes. I'm right on the nose as we speak. So I hope it was interesting, understandable, and hope you learned something. Thanks for attending. And, as I said, I would give you guys my email, rkh@hiltonlawny.com, for any particular questions. Again, I apologize for my lack of sophistication regarding the technology. I'm getting better, but still not good. So if you ever need, contact me. Also, of course, if anyone wants to come and talk about any of these issues, the first meeting, the first hour is no charge. We're not obligated. If you don't ever want to come back, we miss you, but there's no charge for that. So please feel free to contact the office. The number is 315-624-9600, and we could talk about your personal situation and hopefully strategize any of these or other things for you. Thanks for coming. Take care.